So I really wanted to read some horror. I really wanted to read some spooky books last month for Halloween season, and I chose a few different ones, but there was one in particular that really surprised me. It surprised me for reasons that were in themselves surprising, I guess, if that makes sense. Anyway, the book that I'm talking about is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and this is the one that I have. It's an older print. It actually looked really short when I first grabbed it, and I was surprised, but then come to realize that it has practically no margins, and the lettering is super tiny, but it was kind of nice either way. So yeah, ever since I finished reading this book, and then also Guillermo del Toro's movie adaptation came out around the same time that I was reading this, so I watched that right after, and I have not been able to stop thinking about this story. I literally just read this, a couple weeks ago, and I want to reread it again. And it's because there are so many interesting themes in this book. There's creation, prejudice, revenge, nature versus nurture. But the one that stuck with me the most throughout the book, and I think especially after watching Del Toro's movie adaptation, was the theme of loneliness and isolation and disconnection. If you've watched some of my other videos, you might know that I am really passionate about mental health and how it shapes the human experience. So I thought it would be a fun project, since I'm learning photography, to take some Frankenstein-inspired photographs to go along with this video, specifically with the theme of loneliness and isolation. So I'm gonna be overlaying the pictures that I took while I'm talking, and yeah, hopefully they came out okay. So the first thing that stood out to me was this idea of being born into a world that judges you on first glance. And that's not to say that everyone is going to be a judgmental asshole, right? Although I'm sure we all know a few of those. But seriously though, I think we can all agree that there are a series of societal norms around what is acceptable or attractive or even normal. Looking at how Frankenstein's creature was so scared of what people would think of him before actually getting to know him is such a valid fear, and it's such a human fear and a human experience. And I thought it was really interesting that Mary Shelley was able to show us through the eyes of this monster or creature something that we can all relate to. And I know that everyone can probably relate to it on different levels. Fundamentally, it is really something that all of us have experienced to some extent at one point or another. The next thing that stood out to me was this idea of abandonment, and abandonment by those that are meant to love you and protect you and support you. This particular one I can really relate to because, I guess, in two ways. So one way is not really the literal maybe definition of abandonment, but when I lost my parents as a teenager, I did feel that sense of abandonment of, the two people who were kind of like the pillars of support in my life were just gone. And it felt like abandonment in a way. I don't know if anybody can relate to that. But then of course I've felt abandonment in the more literal sense of having people close to me maybe disappear, friendships fall out in ways that maybe weren't the kindest. I think maybe that's something that a lot of people, most everybody, can relate to as well. Another component of the loneliness theme, the isolation theme, is the feeling of desperately wanting to be seen and desperately wanting to be loved. I think the movie did such a wonderful job of portraying that. The book as well. I mean, even when I was reading some of the book, I was kind of tearing up. And yeah, that desire for connection and community is such an integral part of what it means to be human, and not even just the desire for it, but the need for it, right? We know that this is super important for mental health. So yeah, I found that part of the book to be super meaningful and impactful as well. Kind of along those lines is the idea of trying very hard to win over people's affection by doing things for them, or putting your needs maybe aside to serve the needs of others. I think that you don't really have to be a people pleaser type of person. to have experienced this, right? There's probably someone in your life where you felt like you really wanted to be seen by them, you wanted to be loved by them, or maybe just supported or respected or whatever it was. You went out of your way to show them what kind of person you were, right? But you were a person worth noticing and loving and supporting. And maybe you didn't, even with all that effort, you still didn't receive that. And that, I think, is such a truly heartbreaking and devastating feeling. And then one final thing that kind of went along with this theme was the idea of the restorative power that lies in the small things that we take for granted. And also, I guess, maybe the restorative power, like the healing powers of nature. And there's a specific passage in the book where the creature talks about how he usually travels by night to avoid being seen and stay safe. But there's one morning where he knows he's going to be traveling through like a really thick forest or something. He decides to just say fuck it and go through the forest during the day. And the way he describes the emotions that he feels is really beautiful. I felt emotions of gentleness and pleasure that had long appeared dead revive within me. Half surprised by the novelty of these sensations, I allowed myself to be borne away by them, and forgetting my solitude and deformity, dared to be happy. Soft tears again bedewed my cheeks, and I even raised my humid eyes with thankfulness towards the blessed sun, which bestowed such joy upon me. I love that so much. I have to admit, I did not know a lot about Frankenstein going into reading this book, and so I was not expecting to be in my feels as much as I was, where it's so much more than just a scary story. Not that there's anything wrong with just purely scary things, of course. I love those too. But yeah, that's what I think really got me about this. Especially that Mary Shelley wrote this when she was so young. I mean, afterwards I was going down the rabbit hole and learning that Mary Shelley wrote this when she was 19. I think it was 19, and it was for like some kind of contest that she was doing with some friends or something. It wasn't even like a serious, I'm gonna sit down and write a book. And yeah, absolutely wild. Like, what? But yeah, that's pretty much all I had for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought about the different themes throughout the book, but also movie-wise. I know that there's a lot of other great movie adaptations, so I'm curious which one y'all recommend. And I also want to read more classics. So if there are any recommendations, it doesn't have to be a scary book. It could be any genre within like classic literature. I really want to get to reading. I have a list of ones that I have on this bookshelf actually that I want to read. But yeah, I'm curious to know what y'all's recommendations are. So please let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, thanks for watching.